Kenyan President William Ruto is facing the biggest crisis of his 2 years in office. Hundreds of protesters have gathered in the capital, Nairobi, yet again to call for his resignation. Police have fired tear gas at the crowds and they've made several arrests. The unrest began in June with rallies against a controversial finance bill that would have raised taxes. Ruto deployed the army and the crackdown killed at least 60 people. Finally, in response to protesters' demands, Ruto scrapped the bill and reshuffled his cabinet. But many Kenyans are calling for justice for the activists killed and an end to what they say is endemic government corruption. Well, for more on this, we're going to talk to Webb. He's joining us now from Nairobi. Malcolm, over the last couple of hours or so, we've been seeing very intense pictures coming out of Nairobi. Just talk us through what's been happening.
Well, what started with dozens of protesters grew in number to probably a couple of hundred at least, trying to gather just in this area and within 2 or 3 blocks surrounding here. But every time they've tried to gather, the police have broken them up with tear gas. If we take a look down this street, it's absolutely littered with shattered tear gas canisters. They've been firing them again and again at even the smallest numbers of protesters, but the protesters nonetheless managed to gather into a group of, a much more significant group just in the last half hour or so, before again yet more volleys of tear gas have pushed them into the side streets. But they're still here, still not far away. We can still see a few of them. You can also see police trucks, more police trucks arriving full of riot police, suggesting that what the police hope to do now is completely clear these streets. The demonstrators are angry following President William Ruto's appointment of a new cabinet earlier today, except some of the ministers aren't new. That's part of the problem. He fired almost his entire cabinet in response to these demonstrations and then re-appointed several of his own ministers and also included 3 politicians from the political opposition. Now, the political opposition haven't led these protests. They haven't really been involved, and it's widely seen as a view to try and secure his political position. Politics in Kenya is known for its endemic corruption. Those in the most senior positions tend to grow extremely wealthy, and cutting the political opposition into government is widely seen as a way of preventing a backlash against William Ruto and his government in Parliament. Protesters have been calling for President Ruto to go. One of the few ways in which that would be possible would be if he was impeached by Parliament. But of course, if both the opposition and the ruling party are towing his line, then that's very hard to imagine that happening. Elections aren't due here for another 3 years. Demonstrators, as you mentioned, also been calling for justice for the dozens of people killed and also the dozens of people who've been abducted or gone missing. Many have been say that they've been interrogated and released. A handful of others have been found later dead, and some others are still missing. Police deny extrajudicial killings. But rights groups say that the state is responsible for this and that it's a crackdown on the attempt by mainly young Kenyans to express their discontent with their government.
Malcolm, we were talking earlier that this began back in June. Is there any indication that you have about whether or not the protests are continuing with the same intensity, or is there a change in the number of people or the types of people who are taking to the streets these days?
We're seeing far fewer people than on the busiest days, which well, it was on the 25th of June, which was the 3rd demonstration, that protesters entered Parliament. Police and security forces responded, shooting dozens of them. About 24 people died that day, and that further angered the crowd. Now, it was in the days following that President William Ruto withdrew the controversial finance bill, which was the government's plan to raise taxes for the second year in a row, but at a time when many Kenyans are struggling with the cost of living, real wages have stagnated for years, and as well as the endemic corruption, also the extraordinary displays of personal private wealth by politicians become normal. Politicians showing off their helicopters or their watches worth tens of thousands of dollars. People started pointing these things out on social media. The following grew, the anger grew, and then the numbers on the streets absolutely exploded at the end of June. And since then, we've seen on the days when protests are planned, police blocking some of the main roads leading into the city so that people walking in from some of the low-income areas on the periphery aren't allowed to pass. We've also seen here, as we have today, police trying to stop any demonstration from happening before it even starts by tear gassing even the smallest groups of protesters.
Yeah, Malcolm, we're getting a sense of the size of the security forces' presence on the streets. Just as you're talking, it's obviously we've been watching what you've been showing to us, and we can see them behind you. For now, Malcolm Webb in Nairobi, thank you very much indeed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.